help kick this off and get the session started. I believe yesterday we heard that there were 120 participants on the live streaming with Facebook. So we have other participants with us other than just who's here in the room. So the session's titled Protecting Utilities from the Risk of New Technologies with Outcome-Based Solutions. This sounds a little different than trips to Antarctica, which we just heard about, so no pressure for the panel. A few housekeeping items, if you could take a moment and silence your cell phone. And while you're on your cell phone to silence it, maybe open up the application for the session. And in there you can ask questions, which will be streamed to the participants in the Q&A session.
We're just going to use the mic.
I did not know that. We are just going to use the mic. So when we get to the Q&A time, I'll pass the mic around and we can field those questions. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike and Wiebe.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's session. It's a real pleasure to see everybody here this morning, especially after that great party that I threw last night. I wasn't sure exactly how many of us were going to show up for this morning other than the panelists and myself. Today's topic, this morning's topic is for us, I think, a really interesting one. For the industry, a really interesting one now. How to protect utilities from the risk of new technologies, where you've got all these new technologies coming out into the marketplace, and our outcome-based solutions, what value proposition do they offer? From my perspective, for those of you who aren't familiar with the firm, we've done projects in 14 countries around the world, and these kind of outcome-based solutions are really something that have come up a lot. And so I'm really interested to hear what our panelists have to throw into the conversation and what insights they see, particularly Matt from a global perspective, from an Accenture view. How do we see this opportunity in the U.S. marketplace in particular, with some rule changes that seem to be taken from an accounting perspective? So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation this morning. I'm not going to introduce the panelists, they're going to introduce themselves. You see the names up here on the screen. So with that, we'll start from you and continue on there.
Thank you very much. And good morning, my name is Darron Poulsen. I currently work for the City of Pomona as the Director for Water and Wastewater Resources. Over my 30 years in this industry, I've worked all of my career in Southern California, working for very large private utilities, as well as the other half of my career working for the public sector. So really excited to be here this morning and talk about these technologies and these outcomes that we're dealing with in Southern California with regards to water, which I'm sure all of you are aware are a pretty big deal right now. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, bro. I'm glad to have you here today.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Myerson. I'm with CenterPoint Energy, based out of Houston, Texas, and we serve 6 states, kind of in the central part of the United States. Been with the company about 35 years, and primarily in the operations side, electric and gas operations and supporting roles. And today I'm responsible for our enterprise application environments, as well as our project and portfolio management for our technology side. Previously, I was part of the PMO that implemented our advanced metering system, where we implemented the Itron open waste system on the electric side, and also our advanced distribution management system. I look forward to visiting today on these topics. I think it'll be a good discussion.
So good morning, my name is Sasha Weintraub. I'm with Duke Energy. So Duke serves customers in the Carolinas, Florida, Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. We also have a national presence on some renewable business as well. At Duke, I'm responsible for a variety of groups, two which I think play big roles here. One is around big data and analytics. So growing the team of data scientists to look at the data that we're now collecting and trying to figure out what's the value in there that customers were willing to pay for, to make our operations more efficient. I also have responsibility for products and services that we serve to our customers and growing them. And we generally base those on revenue-based services, EE products, outdoor lighting, demand response, backup power supply, a variety of things. We're also beginning to realize now a lot of the services our customers want are not revenue generating, but have value for us to do them. So we're working on prepaid programs, pick your own due date associated with when you can pay your bill, outage alerts, when kind of two-way outage notification when you have an outage. So we are going down this path of providing a customer experience that really changes the relationship that a customer has with Duke. We're really starting that with the meter. And so when we put on a smart meter, and we want to get away from just saying you've now put a smart meter on your house versus an old meter. We now want to say that these are the products and services that come with this meter that can change your experience with all these different programs. So I look forward to the conversation, because certainly an outcome-based solution, you know, we're talking about the different definition amongst all of us of what that means. But one thing I'm certain of, our customers want something different, just because it's happening around them. And I think that's where we're going to have a conversation today.
Yes.
So, good morning. I'm Matthew Comte from Accenture. I'm managing director, easy for me to say, in our T&D practice. I've spent the last 18 years working with utility companies in metered cash and also in the T&D side. And one thing that's kind of clear to me as we look at the utility industry, we also think through how Accenture can serve utilities better, is around how do we underwrite and how do we guarantee outcomes for customers. And we're taking a solid look at several factors that we'll discuss today, but we're taking looks into how accounting treatments have changed in the last few years that allows some capitalization of licenses, how the market's changing. There's something happening in the market that's really putting a lot of factors on O&M spend and efficiency that we need to underwrite at the C-suite. And then how does Accenture change its business so that we serve our clients better? So to Sasha's point of utilities looking at how do you serve your customer, we're also looking at how do we serve our customers, you all. And how does this thing change? And it's changing rapidly. And you know, the market and how we do technology and how we do process and how we do organizational design and what we do for our customers in those markets will be radically different in 10 years than it is today. And you know, those that kind of are changing today are the ones that are going to be leading tomorrow. So look forward to kind of that conversation.
Guys, thank you so much for that introduction of yourselves and your positions. It really does seem like there's a lot of thoughtful work that's already going on with your respective companies and problems. So let's have an overarching question. It seems from our discussions like a lot of other industries are already moving into the direction of outcome-based services, where the providers provide a lot of service, or different amounts of service, everywhere from just managing one or two pieces of a project all the way up to just actually delivering the service. How do you gentlemen see this from a utility industry perspective?
I'll start out. So let's think about history here before I answer that question.
Sure.
So utilities exist for economies of scale. So right now, the lights turn on, and behind it is everything that you talked about, right? The utilities are managing large power plants of all different types: baseload, intermediate, peaking, renewables. We're managing transmission systems and distribution. So it really is almost, I would say, a physical cloud-based service for customers who turn on the light switch and they get lights. I think, so that's where we are, and that's how it works. We do this because of the economies of scale of doing that once versus many, and utilities earn a return on the capital to do all that. I think now what's evolving is, and by the way, we provide really one outcome, which is typically a reliable, regulated outcome, depending upon where you are, but for the most part, that's what Duke does. I think what we're finding out now is that customers might want other outcomes, and how do we do that in that context? So at work, people have heard me say we provide an electron, and that's what we sell you. But it might be that people want a green electron. It might be that people want a more reliable electron. It might be that many of our customers want a basic electron because that's all they can afford. So how do you provide these choices? And when we say outcomes, to me, outcomes are different choices of an outcome for our customers to do that. And I think that's where we're kind of having lots of discussion around different business models and how do you do that. And it gets into a lot of different areas around how we actually are able to serve different outcomes when we're designed to provide really a low-cost, reliable outcome. And again, technology is making it such that these big power plants that were, economies of scale, we're now talking about that happening at the grid edge. We're talking about rooftop solar. We're talking about distributed generation. And that's a difference that I think we're trying to all work into the solution. I believe, my opinion, is that utilities have done this very, very well. And I think using the utility and the systems to integrate all these different outcomes is the path forward that we'll be working towards, and I think it'll be the best outcome for many, being able to plug and play different solutions depending upon what outcome you want.
You raised an interesting point that I want to, a loose thread that I want to pull on, but before I do that, does anybody else have anything that they'd like to contribute to this topic?
Well, what I was going to suggest is that from a utility perspective, we have an obligation to provide that energy, and I agree with what Sasha said. Our industry is set up to make us responsible for that. I think that the closer to the customer, the less likely we are to want to adopt a service-based solution. And the further back from the customer, maybe things like human resources, supply chain, things like that, we're more interested in adopting that. Now, I'm not saying we won't over time, but both on the gas side and on the electric side, we have that responsibility for making sure that we're able to measure the consumption accurately, that we're able to provide the billing, and that we're able to provide the level of reliable, safe service that our customers expect. And we can't share that responsibility too lightly.
I interpret that as sort of core high-touch activities with the customer versus non-core, behind-the-scenes, low-touch kinds that the customer doesn't really see.
I think that's a good point, yes. That's a good way to summarize it.
Interesting. Okay, great.
And the only thing I wanted to add from the water industry perspective that I think is different than some of my partners up here with regards to the energy side, is the scale of business with regards to the energy world compared to the water world.
Sure.
Right? With regards to, different water utilities of different sizes. My community that I live in, that I'm operating now, only serves about 30,000 connections, about 160,000 people. So where water utilities struggle is we, 10, 12 years ago, we operated very autonomously. We all weren't collaborating, we weren't working together, and especially in Southern California, it was my water, and we kind of held on to it tight. And yet the community right next door to you may be importing water, and costs of water differences were like 2 or 3 times. It's about the haves and the have-nots with regards to water. It's also about the haves and the have-nots for internal resources. Smaller agencies, especially municipal agencies, are really struggling to have the necessary resources and the manpower to deliver, right? What's driving some of our customer wants from the energy side. So people are calling up and saying, well, why don't you do the same thing as Southern California Edison? Why don't you present my data? Especially if you're clamoring and advertising about drought in Southern California, why don't you give me the same tools? So we're feeling that pressure right now, and the outcomes for our communities right now are driven by the energy side, but also now that shortage of water is becoming a big deal, and the customers are asking for more.
So I agree with you. We certainly see that project we worked on that was a very large utility, tens of millions of meters, huge IT department, but some of the projects that we're doing now much smaller. They don't have the IT resources. So do you see a dividing line between IT and non-IT in terms of outcome-based?
Today, we only have 2 physical staff members that are city employees that are IT. The rest of the IT is outsourced. Cities and municipalities have been using outsourcing for a long time. What I'm hoping to see, or what I am hoping to see, is that maybe we'll start seeing greater collaboration regionally, maybe even across municipalities, even between a private and a public utility in the water space. If we're going to be successful, I think it's time that we kind of unite our efforts and put together maybe packages where multiple utilities are working towards, collaborating on an outcome.
Agreed. The industry's tried that. I think, Matt, you've seen it from an industry broad perspective. Utilities trying to collaborate between electric and water. It's usually non-technical reasons that have caused those projects to founder and not go ahead. Legal issues, liability issues and such. But on the basic topic, do you have anything that you want to add to this one?
I think it's as we go around the definition of what do we mean by outcome, I think is really where we need to kind of settle down. I think there are outcomes desired by the utility customers. There's also what kind of outcomes when you do projects, when you do capital projects in order to serve these customer needs and wants and desires. Today we usually kick off a capital, come onto your premise, we do design, build, test, deploy of some kind of solution. And there's an accounting treatment behind that. In that world, I love the points that were made by Jeff and Sasha and Darron about, it's a regulatory asset that we're creating at that point. We're then optimizing that just like we do all the other assets that we own. We put them on the balance sheet and we maintain those assets. I think in the world that we think through and where outcome-based solutions are going is a world where maybe our regulators aren't asking us to optimize and operate assets. Maybe they're asking us to be more efficient and effective. And I think the international point that we're seeing is in Europe with things like Rio, which is the rate scheme that's been created in the UK, where now utilities are incented to be efficient, meaning that they drive down O&M and actually drive up ROE and return on capital, and they get to keep some of it. It's in partnership with. Now, does that start changing the game to where these solutions, where you go to your providers and your partners and you say, Itron, Accenture, whomever, I need this for my client or my customer. I need these real-time analytics to drive down their energy efficiency and to monetize that. I don't care how you get it. I need it now. And then we start talking about, well, what outcome do you want? And you're starting to monetize that kind of in a different way. Instead of paying fees to get stuff on your balance sheet, now you're saying, I'll pay you this per month to give you that outcome. And I think that's the kind of the nuance here of, are we going to, do we talk about it in terms of today, or do we talk about it in terms of where, what if we got there? And I think there's several strings off of that we could talk about, because the regulators in the way, the accounting and treatments are in the way, how we do asset management's in the way. There's a lot of things in the way of that, but I think if we agree that energy efficiency and this new in DERs are going to change our business, then it may be worth talking about.
And it's interesting how it can have an effect. I think you've pulled on a very fascinating thread, because we've just recently run across a company very outcome-based from the services perspective, because what they're proposing to do is take the data from a utility's AMI system, process it for field crew dispatch and utilization, and they'll tell the utility where to dispatch a field crew and how to manage field crew dispatch so that it reduces the total cost of field crews from a utility perspective. They're not selling this particular, we'll see how this works out in the marketplace, but they're not selling the application. They're not selling a service in the traditional sense of dollars per day. They want a piece of the reduction of the cost of field crews travel. So some very interesting new business models, I think, that are beginning to be explored by these companies pursuing outcome-based service models as well.
Well, I think analytics becomes an area of opportunity as well, and analytics is a great space where I think there is a lot of opportunity for collaboration, because we're all dealing with the same challenges from operating a utility. We're going to deal with the same challenges with distributed energy and new resources of generation. So managing the grid is going to be a lot more complicated process. And so these smart meters that we've all deployed or are deploying are sensors on the network. And we're going to have many more sensors than that. As we acquire all of that information, the methods that we use to extract information out of that data is really something that is an outcome-based solution. And I think there is opportunity for us to share in that and to subscribe to services that really take that data and turn it into the useful, valuable information for utilities.
That's a really great insight. So, does anybody else have anything that they want to add on this particular topic? I don't want to cut you short, but it certainly generates the next question in the discussion as well. So, from that perspective, then, with an outcome-based service model, the utility systems that collect and manage the data may or may not be on premises. So, who's going to be responsible? Who has the sole responsibility for managing? If it's the entire system is off-prem, if a portion of the system is off-prem, if it's just the IT piece of it. So from that perspective, what's it mean to rely on a service provider to provide the actions, to provide the services? Now, is this like outsourcing, meter reading in days of old, either manual metering or drive-by metering? Or what's different about it from an outcome-based model?
Well, I'll use an example here at the Knowledge Center. There's a vendor, Paygo. So Paygo is who we are using for our prepaid program. And so we are in essence sending them, when someone enrolls in the Paygo prepaid program that we've partnered with them with, we're sending them data, and they're the ones who are then providing the screenshot. Now, certainly we've wrapped it around a Duke labeling logos, but they're providing the screens to say how many days are left. They're actually doing some of the collection around the dollars for it, and it's really just a data transfer back and forth. So, with API connections associated with different systems, you can do that, and I think that makes sense. Now, certainly, it's still our data. It's still our customers. It's still, they're a vendor for us, and there's certainly arrangements, but I think it works great, and I think that's what we need to do more of with vendors that have a specific product that we can just connect data systems versus bring it in-house. There's a lot of issues that we had to overcome internally. The security issues. Cybersecurity is a buzzword that you hear whenever you talk about this, but you can overcome that. Making sure that any type of personal information from a customer standpoint has that no one in another company can take social security numbers and do. I mean, there's issues that you just got to take care of. All doable, all solvable, and I think that's where we're going to go more and more, is to have those types of plug-and-play partners.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Jeff, Darron, anything you want to add on that?
Well, I think we've been doing those kind of interactions with our customer base through, outsourced consultants or other companies, through the IT venue. That makes good sense, and we've all done it. For those customers, that's pretty seamless. That they can't tell the difference. I think where I do see the future going right now, when I think about trying to manage a network long term, and having worked at a previous utility, and understanding the fact that once you install a network, it just doesn't operate itself. That there's a great deal of management beyond just the technical side, just the delivery of, say, the information. There's a physical side to this business. And in a small utility such as a water utility, if you've promised elected officials and city managers that this service will deliver, well, then it has to be maintained. So you bring up a good point of, those outcomes and that desire to maintain that system. The first 5 years, maybe it operates very, very well, but at year 10, what is it going to look like? And is that going to require some additional resources to maintain it, to keep it going? What's it going to be like if technology changes and you don't have the manpower or the staff to change that out? What I think will be interesting in the future, when I'm thinking about outsourcing, is, you can get a KPI, you can get a physical number of what that looks like with regards, did you change out somebody, what's the failure rate, how quick do you respond? The one thing that we've always held tight on too is our true public interaction. How are we going to measure whether or not that outsourced service is delivering to our public that intangible, that level of customer service? That's a question that I think, I can make dollars and cents on the return on investment with regards to bringing in a service. How am I going to measure that?
So how are you going to measure that?
Yeah, right? Is it about surveys, right? It's about being transparent and communicating with your public, because they want to be communicated to these days, right? They want to interact, but that's a different business model than I think we've been dealing with.
So interaction has come up a couple times now. Is that really a common thread for all of you that you see, or is that a market segment that needs interaction? And is it universal interaction, or do you have to tune different kinds of interactions, particularly now in an outcome-based model, because you're going to pay for every outcome. So if you have different customer segments, and therefore you're delivering different outcomes, how do you manage that? How do you monetize that? And how do you track performance? Is that something that you see, or do you think one homogeneous service actually meets everybody's needs?
Well, I think there's an expectation by our customers and by us as customers of others to have a very personalized service. I think we're expected to be able to provide that. We have 5.5 million metered points of service, and they all want it their way, right? They want to be communicated with the way they want to be communicated with. They want to pay the bills the way they want to pay. They want information from us the way they want. We've been investing in what we call a preference center, which is a web portal that allows people to select the way they want to have their interaction with CenterPoint Energy. And that has been extremely valuable, right? We have the power alert service, which allows people to know at their discretion when their power is off, that we know it, when we've got a crew en route, when the estimated response or estimated restoration time is, things like that. Same thing on the gas side, when they schedule an appointment, when a crew is going to be available to do the work. So we're working with our customers to provide that as a service. Now, Could that be a cloud-based solution? I suppose it could be. We've not taken that route because we want to build that in a very specific way to drive a very specific outcome and service level with those customers.
So that pulls a loose thread in that one of our clients, the CEO, was adamant that he doesn't care about any of the technologies. His competition isn't solar bypass, isn't any of these other kinds of things. His competition is Macy's. His competition is the cell phone carriers and or the banks, whoever has the highest level of customer satisfaction, because his customers are now holding him and his utility accountable. Wait a minute, we pay you a lot of money every month, every year, and frankly, we are not satisfied with the level of service that we're getting. So does that suggest that going outside the normal boundaries of who you might think about as a resource to look at these kind of outcome-based services, is that a place to go looking rather than just being internally focused all the time?
Yes, I think we compete with Amazon, we compete with Chase Bank, we compete, you name your big companies, that's who we compete with. That's who establishes expectations for our customers. They establish expectations for me. And I expect the same capabilities to be provided by my utility as I do from my bank.
It sounds like Darron has that issue. Matthew, Sasha, do you see things sort of the same way?
Yeah, so when you think about, we provide energy, an electron, and for the longest time, we provided the electron, gave you a bill, and if there was a disruption, we came and fixed it. I think all of a sudden now that's changing. Think about disaggregated load and where that's going with sensor technology. Pretty soon, we should know, you should know, all the different ways that you're using energy in your house, between your lighting, between your different appliances. Imagine if you're able to know that your HVAC system, say you turn it on in the springtime after the winter, and you get a report saying you seem to be using more energy than last summer. Have you checked your coolant? Do you need a mechanic? And oh, by the way, here's a referral of mechanics that you should be calling upon that we've already negotiated and sought out. So I think these outcome-based services are going much farther than they traditionally have. And our customers are beginning to expect that. We already have customers, just to go from an outcome-based, where they just want to pay for the lumens coming out of a light. They do not want to worry about the lighting system. They don't want to worry about anything. They just want to pay per lumen and let us worry about that. So that is already kind of a conversation that we're having. They're typically one-offs, but I think that's where customers need and are really demanding us to go because of all these different customer expectations. You can now order a pizza and know, is your pizza still in the oven? And when's it going to be delivered? I mean, that's just kind of what's being expected of customers.
So let me clarify, because a lot of the services that you just referenced and that I've heard Matthew and Jeff and Darron talk about, honestly, they're not new. I mean, we've been talking about a lot of these kind of services and customer empowerment, reaching out to the customer for more than years. What's different? Is it that the customer has matured because they're having these other experiences with the so-called customer satisfaction competition? Is that really what's changing, driving more broad-scale expectations?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is cost of technology as well. So we typically provide, there's a threshold where we get involved, because typically we're doing it for the masses, which requires cost effectiveness from a much broader scale. A lot of times the solar systems are good. Solar costs were much higher and we're coming down. So I think technology costs are going down, and we all know that. And that's driving now a level of, think about the smartphone. The smartphone is now where customers are able to interact with other companies via the phone. 5-7 years ago, it wasn't that way. So as technology is decreasing, as more and more options are coming, it's just where society is going and requires us to move and adopt. And that's really what I think is different, is the cost of all this is dropping such that it's now infringing upon business models and others, on a variety of industries, energy industry, even the financial industry. I was reading an article that chatbots are soon going to take away financial advisors because the technology to do that is here and it's able to do that. So that's what I think is the difference.
So Matthew, do you see this, I mean, I'm going to assume that you have a kind of a global perspective being an Accenture. I mean, is this a global thing so that it's actually going to drive much broader innovation in terms of service providers, cross-fertilization of ideas? Because if we have a global market as opposed to just a US market, that means that all markets should be able to benefit from more people thinking about outcome-based solutions and innovation.
I think ultimately, I would put that out on the horizon, the globalization effect. But I would say what we're seeing in the globe is that the pockets are starting to move and the pack's starting to shake up. I think the points that are coming out here is where are our utility customers starting to pull the utility into outcome-based, which is then pulling the service providers into it as well. So it's a chain, and it's actually, there's two areas that we've seen it most here recently: digital customer and analytics. So it's interesting to hear Jeff and Sasha talk about those two areas because those are the areas that our customers, our utility customers, want to see outcomes in. So take the digital customer. So we see this what we call liquid expectations, that all customers, if they can get an experience at Comcast or at Best Buy, they expect that same experience through cross industry. So we can't really just hide behind we're a utility company or a commodity anymore, because all of our customers expect a threshold. So when we look at J.D. Powers now, and we say, okay, we're middle of the pack, we're pretty good, or we're top quartile, we're top quartile in the worst performing industry. And so that means needs to be some change there, and it needs to be very rapid. So so we have clients coming to us all over the globe saying, hey, can you give us a solution? I mean, we need to get things out to the customer. We need it around energy efficiency. We need around, even on the employee side, around field enablement. But we need those quickly, and we need them now. So we're interested in anything that you can partner with us. And then we start the conversation with our clients around how do you enable that. And it does turn into commercial conversations, and then how do you evolve away from an outsourcing model into more of a shared outcome model. We do see the pressure to your point. Europe is probably ahead of us, and I think there's data that supports that. But their markets have changed so radically. Do you see our U.S. market changing that fast? I think we would have to argue we're much more conservative with how we manage some of those regulatory relationships, and because we're decentralized in our government state of each of the 50 states managing each utility in a different scheme, even though some are similar. Those are barriers to, I think, us seeing this rapidly, but still the business is changing. I mean, so with energy efficiency, with us as utilities, our revenues are under pressure. We need to become more efficient. I think those are the headlines, and then our customers expect more outcomes. They expect things more rapidly. Our operations need to work more efficiently. And so going out and buying millions of dollars worth of services from our softwares and our advisors, although it worked in the past, I don't know if it works in the future. And for both of us to stay relevant, we have to kind of evolve to these kind of models. And I think that's what we're seeing globally, is each market's kind of interpreted it differently. Some are more liberal than others.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly, one of our clients in Germany, to your point about different regulatory environments, when the government says thou shalt, it kind of simplifies the whole process as compared to 50 different sets of regulators in the U.S. It brings about, though, the question on technology. And so originally we were thinking in terms of just communication technology. Communication technology is constantly evolving. Yesterday's networks are getting faster and faster and faster. Now we stream movies, we do all kinds of cool things. But a lot of what I've been hearing discussed right now is less communication networks and more IT systems and analytics and, depending on the market segment, maybe outsourcing more of the IT, less buying IT-oriented services, data analytics, as Jeff mentioned. So let's peel this onion a little bit. What is, in fact, if technology continues to evolve quickly, are both the networks and the IT systems equally important in terms of the evolution and the sensitivity to outsourcing? Is IT more sensitive, more important, more valuable because that's the latter market, that's the one that's developing perhaps more quickly than networks? What do you gentlemen think?
So I've read a lot on the parallel with telecommunication industry. So if you recall, I remember thinking, reading and understanding now, there used to be a time where the value was thought to be the network themselves. So think of Juniper Networks and Cisco and Nortel and others. And that's where a lot of people thought value was going to be created. But that's really hard work to run that type of infrastructure. And it's really, it's a grind, it requires a ton of work, and it's not always the sexiest, right? And really what happened was it was the content that all of a sudden drove value. So you think about Netflix, you can think about even on Amazon. I mean, it's different than the infrastructure, the telecommunication systems. So I think a little bit of what we're talking about is in parallel with that, where yes, the telecommunication, the infrastructure is important. It's the content that we're going to be pushing to our customers is changing. Whether it's how efficient is your HVAC, I get surprised. We had a young intern who bought a camera, and the camera now has a screen, a zone that he can put down. So he has two cameras. He put one on his front door, so someone comes to his front door. When the motion happens, he gets a text. He can look at the front door and see what happens. So that's pretty neat. You can do that. He took the other camera and put it on his couch. And whenever his dog jumped off on the couch, he got a text. And this camera has a speakerphone, and he trained his dog while at work to not get on the couch. Right? So it wasn't the infrastructure of the internet. It was the software and all this that kind of made that work, and he loved it. I mean, he tells people that's how you train your dog, not jump on the couch. So I think that's what I'm getting at, is that it's the content that gives people value add that they're going to pay for, not the fact that you can get super fast or whatever type of speed to the home. It's the content, and I think that's where, again, we used to provide an electron, but now it's the content around that electron that's changing. How is it being used? Is it efficient? We're working on situations where we would be saying, your lighting load compared to your neighbor is different. Have you changed your lights to LED? Should you? Here's the payback period. I mean, those are the type of things I think that customers are going to want from us.
Yeah, how do you translate this energy discussion onto the water side?
I always enjoy coming to this conference because it always seems that the energy side is always a little bit more ahead of us with regards to the water world. They're already dealing with on a much larger scale this customer interaction, the significant data sets that they're dealing with compared to our data sets. But it eventually rolls to us, and it's really great to come here and to learn from them and what they're doing. Today in the water world, in the small municipal space that I work in, look, 5 years ago, the cloud was a bad word to my IT staff, right? They were very, very much about, this is protected and my little agency and I want to protect that. But the customers and technology is driving them to finally realize they don't have the skill set. Right, and I heard today too a couple words with regards to change and efficiency. Well, those are words that usually aren't synonymous with municipal environments, okay? We're not good with those kinds of things. So, but we're being pushed, and it's from our elected officials, from our local elected officials, from our state officials who are hearing from constituents the fact that, look, this is a big deal. Water is a big deal these days. I mean, from Southern California drought to the deals, the issues up in Flint, Michigan, right? Water's taking a big picture right now with regards to providing data, providing information to help that customer. It's coming faster. In the 30 years I've been here, the energy world and the utilities were always 10 or 15 years ahead of us, and now that seems to be shrinking.
I like the observation because we actually had a fascinating conversation with one of our water clients just a couple of weeks ago around conservation that I never believed that we would have. And it's probably not the case in Pomona, but apparently many water utilities derive a lot of revenue from something called water coverage over water lawn by a rather significant percentage of our water utilization. So that's not only the cost of chemicals, water, all the infrastructure, the energy to create and move the water, all going down the tubes because of overwatering. But this utility is very interested in it because they've got a problem with access to an aquifer where, getting enough water to meet customer demand in a rapidly growing smaller community is becoming very challenging for them. So they actually do want to reach out to their customers, offer new services to help the customers better understand, hey, you don't need to water quite as much. Here's some suggestions, here's how you can do it. We'll send you actually a reverse engineered analysis on water utilization. So it sounds like you were actually going in those kind of heretofore exotic kind of areas.
Well, so when I had a fixed network deployed at another utility I worked at, you had to kind of retrain and retool some of my meter reading staff. And where did we send them? We sent them to irrigation control school. We sent them to better understand how to, to water their lawns better. And we taught our staff how to go out and present those kinds of ideas to the customer base. It's in Pomona. It's in Southern California. Absolutely.
Fascinating. Jeff, how do you see it?
Well, I want to go back to something you asked earlier, the way you framed this question up, and really it was about the communications infrastructure and what's more important, kind of the technology or the communications. And one thing that I think we've evolved into is recognizing that we're managing a system. And this isn't new, but on the electric and the gas side, obviously we're very skilled at managing a system from generation to delivery, or from the gas storage to delivery. But on the technology side, we're also managing a system. And all the parts have to work together seamlessly, effectively, and without any issue, and in order to deliver that end product. And a customer, be they an internal customer or an external customer, only has their data point of their application or their desktop or their meter or whatever it might be to know whether or not something is working or not. And it's an entire system. And so on the electric AMS or AMI system, we've implemented a technology monitoring environment, much like our own distribution control environment, where we're monitoring the flow of information from the meter all the way back into our back office systems and all the way back out again. Because that is required in order to understand whether or not the system is working adequately. It's not all the piece parts, but rather it's one integrated system.
Yeah, so it is a systems view. So Matthew, from your system's kind of an organization helping others worry through these problems. What's your take on, everything is equal, IT still driving everything, telecom?
I think our take is what we would like to do with our clients is take the technology layer, the digital layer, the operations layer, and combine all that together in a service. And so that Jeff doesn't have to manage that interaction between those points, that becomes a service. And it's not one that he pays by the dream or by each day or hours or outsourced service, that there's an outcome, a reason to operate that network. And that reason is to have better, more efficient billing, to drive energy efficiency. And let's target those two things and say if we can save or we can move the needle in these ways, doesn't matter how we do it, that's how you'll compensate us. And that's the world that we want to get into, so that you don't have to worry about whether it's IT or whether it's operations or whether it's processes. That's just part of the outcome that you want. That's for other people to figure out. It is not, so those things aren't your core, but some of the principles are still at play. It's just who is doing that for you, and then under what financial vehicle will you kind of put that on your balance sheet. Those are the kind of things at play.
Yeah, that feels a little bit like the sort of meter reading outsourced services models that a lot of our clients, your clients, used a decade or so ago until there were some accounting issues. It can eliminate the technology risk, but it introduces supplier risk, and now you have to be much more careful about the contract. And it doesn't eliminate risk; it changes the nature
There's a lot
of
of
risk.
things that change that. I think what makes it more and more interesting, and why it's different, is one, some of the regulatory changes that happened with GAP in 2015 that allows you to put a lot of those costs, implementation costs of upgrades, into a license. So that allows you to capitalize those things. It opens up the conversation, removes some of those barriers to where we can start talking about, well, okay, we're past it can only be O&M. And now we can start talking about, well, which are ways that we can capitalize these license fees. And that gets us into a different type of conversation now.
So that sounds tantalizingly like turning OpEx into CapEx, like tantalizing from an investor when utilities perspective, when their rate of return kind
Well,
of.
that's the reality of where we operate today.
So does that apply to these projects in their entire, because you use the word license, so is that just applicable to software licenses, or, because there's a lot more than just software in these kind of projects?
It's how accounting defines license. And what we see is this software as a service, or these outcomes as a service, are taking what used to be implementation cost, combine that in to cost for the entire outcome, and then capitalizing that just as you would today. But on our books, on the service provider's books, it almost looks like all those implementation costs are there. It almost looks like a financing vehicle, and where you stretch out those implementation costs over a longer period. That's what it looks like on our books. So you kind of get past some of the discussion today. I mean, in how whether it's all O&M, if we go service based, that's just not true anymore. And there's the service providers like Itron, Accenture, and others, our competitors, have vehicles now at play that we can now put different financial measures in place so that you can still capitalize. You get almost the best of both worlds. You get someone that's on the hook to deliver an outcome, which the C-suite loves, and you also get a vehicle that allows you to capitalize a lot of these fees, and a lot of these costs. So I mean, that's some of the change that is allowing us to get together with some of these other discussions, which are, what are we going to put in play?
Yeah, but it's important because your observation is really changing a dynamic on the potential appetite for an IOU to go after an outcome-based model if they can capitalize some of those expenses, core competencies versus non-core competencies and so on. So if there's this new accounting magic as of last year, that's probably something that the industry needs to better understand, because it could have a pretty significant effect. 1 + 1 does not always equal 2, it seems to be the case. So
And I find
let's figure out what that means.
That the CIOs that we talk to now are starting to become very versed in this.
Cool.
Just starting, and then starting to look at what these will look like. To get to break-even point, just to what we believe is you have to kind of look at the horizon of an outcome, and what the total cost of ownership of that asset would be. Because the other cool thing about these new outcome models is that you get to fight technology obsolescence. Not only are you getting the outcome, you're also looking at your service providers and saying, for example, Itron, go take care of this thing and keep me relevant and keep me modern. So I don't have to worry about updating my MDM. That's all baked in. Just have it out there and keep us relevant. So those are some of the things as you look at the total business case and what the break-even point, what the operating points are, as you start fighting some of these futuristic things, the things that evolve, and just think how rapidly mobile is changing, like your iPhone. That in 2005, how many people had an iPhone? I mean, there was a couple out there. In 2011, everybody's has it. Technology, that's the span of what we used to do in an AMI project. 5 years. So that means that, when we started that project in 2010 and 15, we delivered, it's obsolete. So how do you get into those constructs that not only get you outcomes and drive the balance sheet, but also keeps you relevant?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful about obsolete because you've got functional obsolescence, you've got discontinuance of product. And I don't know, my clients shiver at the mention of the word obsolescence because of the expected lifetime of these projects. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what nature of obsolescence are we really concerned about, what percentage of the customer base is really going to change enough where something might in fact become functionally obsolete. So that's a very complicated onion to peel, but it does raise the question. If a utility, and Jeff, I'd love to hear your opinion on this to start, when you move to an outcome-based services model, how does a utility protect itself from technology risks? Matthew made the comment, well, it's baked in. Well, it's only baked into the contract if you add that ingredient into the contract. So how, in fact, do you protect yourself? How does CMP protect itself if it were going to pursue these kinds of outcome-based services?
Well, that's the direction I think a lot of utilities are moving, and certainly we're evaluating that as well. There are certain aspects of our business that we're definitely moving into an outcome-based solution option. I think from a capital investment perspective, our business is based on capital investment primarily around long lifetime investments, 30 years for poles and pipe and wire and things like that. Whereas now we're investing in technology. Technology has a 5 to 7 year life, and the depreciation associated with that is a big O&M expense, right? It's a big hit on O&M, as is the maintenance, as is the overall cost of support, internal cost of support. When you add all of those things up together, it does make financial sense oftentimes. If you look at it over time, over the total cost of ownership of an investment, that a service, outcome-based service, can be more effective than a capital investment. Then the challenge becomes really, is that something I want to take that risk of? Is that a core business, or is that a back office responsibility? So far, we've taken the perspective that if it's back office, we'll look seriously at that. If it's a development or a test environment, we definitely are looking seriously at that. Core production environments, we haven't gone there because of that obsolescence, because of that responsibility that we feel like we have. But the investments, it is critically important that things don't become obsolete in short periods of time. We made an investment in advanced meters on the electric side from 2009 to 2012, and we finished the project, and they have a 20-year life. And so we need them to last for 20 years. And so we need that investment to be perpetuated through the time period that we've made that call.
And that opens up the whole interesting discussion of future-proofing and how much money do you invest into extra capabilities and capacities on these devices, because that increases the hurdle rate for the benefits that you have to come up with, which forces a longer life. There's kind of a negative vicious circle on future-proofing, which I don't even like that term anymore because it's very counterproductive to the entire project in many, many ways. But Sasha, from a Duke perspective.
Well, I think what we've been talking a lot around us, the utility, and how this impacts us. And so think about from a customer standpoint. I don't think we're far along where other people will go to some of our larger customers. A lot of times, whether they're cities, which are wholesale contracts, or they could be the big box shops, national chains, and provide them that type of outcome-based solution in a way that could be behind the meter, and they're lowering their cost by doing. So I think the risk, you mentioned technology risk, and I think there's other risks involved. One of them is that a customer can't receive from the utility what they want, and they go to someone else and they receive that. So I would imagine there's a big box out there that would love to not have to worry about energy, have it taken care of, have a fixed price, have it declining, have a renewable solution because they might be part of their corporate goals to achieve, and they worry about their core business. And so I think there's a risk that if we don't do this or figure out a way to do it for our customers, someone else will. They'll do it behind the meter. They'll do it without the utility, and I think that's a bad day. I think we need to get there and figure this out. There certainly are outcome-based solutions for vendors with us, the utility, and I think that we really need to also focus on how we provide solutions for our customers who are probably we're at risk the most as far as people providing the solutions unique to them, unique to what they want, and we need to figure that out.
Darron, how do you see this potentially either insulating or causing more risk from a water utility perspective?
You know, recently we ventured out on our very first software as a service, software subscriptions.
Okay.
And a big hurdle with regards to getting it and having IT buy into that. But you know, sometimes you take off a small piece and hopefully you can grow. See? And what it's allowing us to do, right, is instead of dealing with obsolescence, right, instead of dealing with buy an application, buy the tools that be within, and then 3 or 5 years later having to go through this change, we've entered into an agreement whereby that software as a service, it's a subscription. All the updates come automatically. It's allowing us to be very dynamic in how we operate. This software as a service connects my hydraulic model as well as my maintenance inspections. And it someday could actually even allow me to expand that service beyond just providing an application to capture that data. Now I could ultimately hand that tool to that organization and say, you've got my model, you've got my maintenance. Help me every year develop the best CIP projects that I can develop. I mean, and where I'm using this today is rather than, you know, going out and getting a master plan, right, a big book that it's good for about 3 years, right? And I put it up on my shelf.
Maybe.
Right? But now, right, what I've got is a tool that's going to be used every year to evaluate. And every year I'll be able to plug in different things into it. I can plug in a pavement management system. I'll be able to take not only my data, but outside data. So I'm trying to build that synergy internally with regards to leveraging not only my data internally, but outside data. And the software as a service is kind of that first hook onto maybe outsourcing a lot more of this data gathering from some of these other departments and now become a repository for all of them to learn and for the city to make smart decisions from there. So we're starting down that path, and it's nice because, you know, in a small city application, I'm not dealing with across numerous states trying to drive this. I can do it on a very small scale. And
well, you can, but there's lots of you having to do it on a small scale. So it feels like an opportunity for an outcome-based service model. Again, the complexity of it and everything, as long as you can customize it. Because I'm hearing this common thread of customization, meeting internal and external customer needs.
I mean, we share today, there's a small group of us that share the same marketing firms. We have the same kind of public outreach because of demographics of similarity. So that collaboration, that cooperation, it could be put out on very large scale, even in the water industry.
Fascinating. Matthew, how do you see this from again, a broader view of the overall marketplace in the U.S.?
I think the point of seeing the market start on the small side is right, Darron. I think it may be from a risk perspective, or maybe it's just that to the capabilities point of being smaller, needing to rely on others' capabilities. But I have seen more as a service sold at the muni and the smaller utility side. In the last 3 or 4 years, I think our partners here at Itron would agree that, and largely in those AMI and kind of the large programs, we see that. So I think the proving ground is there. I think the complexity when you go into the larger markets, and frankly the financial implications, because I know when we at Accenture look at these deals, we have just as much. I mean, the point of these deals is we're in, your skin in. So we go through as much rigor and challenging risk as well, because now we're connected. I mean, this is not a transaction. This is something much different. And being very specific about what services can we really sign up and where can we really put our balance sheet in play for the benefit of these outcomes. And like I said, the market's changing. Advisory services and software and all those things are not going to be the same in 10 years. So the ones that figure this stuff out are the ones that are going to be in the leading edge, and that's why Accenture puts so many resources. To say it's easy right now or baked right now would be a lie. I mean, we're figuring this out. The software providers, the advisory services, all the technology companies, it's all being kind of figured out around individual products. So I haven't seen the industrialization phase. We're still in that early cycle where the providers are trying to size each other and figure out where those capabilities kind of stick together for the benefit of our clients. Our clients are figuring out what kind of constructs that can put us in commercial, and while trying to figure out where their business is going as well. So it's a very nascent situation. And, you know, I think it's going to be very exciting over the next couple of years. I know Accenture will put in huge investments in digital and analytics and as a service, and just really a lot of creative juices around it. So there's appetite to put these together. I think we'll start seeing some deals where analytics is my projection. I mean, that's where we'll start seeing some of these outcome-based on the large scale. And I think Sasha and Jeff have both. I mean, both have responsibility over analytics. I've heard both go through the use cases that these would be valuable. I think those are the things that we could easily get our heads around. But that's just the start. And I think in 10 years, we'll see all those enterprise systems start having these conversations around, should we just be doing them as a service? And should it be outcome-based? I think as we move, but we're very early. That's my...
I agree that we're very early because, I mean, yes, there's a very large penetration of advanced meters, smart meters, whatever you want to call them in the U.S. marketplace, but it's still not pervasive penetration. So until you actually have the data feed, until you get the zeros and ones, there's nothing to analyze. And we're not at the point where every utility has enhanced their corporate capability to be able to manage. I mean, for us, when we look at this, and I think one of the themes I'm hearing from all the panelists right now is these AMI systems are not about saving a few dollars worth of shoe leather on the part of a meter reader, or understanding a little bit more about responding better to power outages or such. They're actually a financial management tool, not only for the CFO, but for the company as a whole, because you're hearing all these conversations around outcome-based, reducing cost of service, improving customer retention, providing better services. So while we keep talking about a smart meter or a sensor or a this or a that, these systems are far more pervasive in terms of the value proposition that they can bring to an individual utility and beyond to the customer. And I just think that there's a lot more to come as you gentlemen peel the onions over the next few years on value-based services and outcome-based services and such.
Michael?
Yes.
I've got a question, just sort of germane to all this. How long before some of the leading utilities are providing internet service and other related things? We're talking about outcomes, and they're primarily around electricity or around water. But it makes sense to me as a consumer now that I get everything from a source, and I know I'm going to need electricity, whether I can generate some and put it back in the grid or just consume if I'm not interested. But why do I need to have a Verizon or an AT&T? I mean, if I think back to 1900 baud modems and 1200 baud modems, that might be where your networks are today. But bigger picture, how long before you guys are doing internet service to your customers?
I think I would use the question again, because many utilities have done that in the past.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I just want to ask Peter the operational question. Do you want us to start entertaining questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
Perfect, then let's go ahead.
So I think that's the question of how do you get back involved with some of these other services, especially the challenge with that too is it's also becoming competitive. So I know in my neighborhood in Charlotte, Google Fiber was coming, and all of a sudden AT&T is upgrading their systems, and you have, it's a competitive landscape, which is your investors might require something different as far as that investment goes. But I think you're spot on as far as how do you take these like utilities and combine them. Duke just merged with Piedmont Natural Gas, and the synergies of that were compelling as far as how you do that. I think that's the question: is how do you do that so it's all together? And then maybe it's not physically owned. Maybe you still have different investor owners. But imagine, does it make sense to have one truck for light duty maintenance calls show up at a home, whether it's all these different services versus 5 trucks of all different showing up. So those are also, I think, where there's synergies and opportunities to really cut costs and provide a better experience for the customer. So I think I use the word again because I think we've all been there, and it makes sense, and then it doesn't make sense, and then it makes sense.
Yeah, we go through the same evaluation process, and it is a process. At one time when we implemented our smart meter grid, if you will, we thought about the opportunity to use it as a communications grid and actually communicate with in-home devices through that. Actually, that didn't materialize because most in-home devices communicate through the web. And also, from our perspective, we were the primary user of our network, of our communications network, because reading the meter, communicating with the meter, hearing from the meter if there was a power outage was of eminent importance and had priority over anything somebody was going to communicate, happy birthday to their, to their spouse or something like that over maybe that communication grid. And we were really concerned about how to prioritize and manage the capacity on that network. So we really just kind of held back and said, we just need to leverage this for what we need. And honestly, we're not limited on the capacity so far, but I think there's so much more we can get from those sensors. I think of meters probably like cell phones were 20 years ago when we used them to talk, and that was it. And a smartphone now is so much more. And I'm not representative, but if I look at my kids who are 20-somethings, they don't talk on their phone. They do everything else on their phone, but they really don't talk on it. Well, someday I think meters will be far more than just measuring consumption, which they do very well, but they'll provide us all kinds of other sensory data about what's going on in that network, which will be absolutely critical to us to be able to manage a two-way electrical network. Because as we have more distributed energy and things like that, we're going to need to have those sensors out there, and now we have 2.4 million of them on our electrical grid. We may need, with the IoT kind of extension, we may need 10 million sensors on the grid. It may be on air conditioner units, and it may be on pool pumps, and it may be on other things that allow us to really get even a more granular view of that. I think that's where the communications power goes. I don't think it's to us compete directly with an AT&T or Verizon or Google or whoever else is out there.
Well, I think the same thing again applies there. Correct me. I'm sorry.
No, thanks. I appreciate that.
Oh, and let's, since we've gone off script now, thank you. Let's just keep going off script. I mean, look, we're having a lot of fun in this discussion up here, I think, and that's nice. But really, we're here to have a panel discussion for y'all. So if anybody else has any questions, by all means, let's raise hands. I think there's some people with microphones.
So Michael, I have a question, if you don't mind. There seems to be a delineation between those outcome services, whether, Jeff, as you were talking about, of managing your distribution network, gas leaks, whatever. But then there's earlier in the discussion, there was a lot of discussion about those services to the consumer. So where do those delineate? And is the vendor community ready to help you really, Sasha, deliver those additional services to your consumer that you talked about? Or is it just tighter collaboration between the vendors and the utility?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think there are some areas where the outcome-based solutions typically right now come out via an RFP process. And so we're asking for a very specific outcome, and we select the lowest total bidder and do this. And I think this is changing. I think you're getting into areas where you have a relationship. And you think about, imagine if you had an outcome-based solution, but every time you want to upgrade to new software, you have to go out to bid for it. And you didn't win this time, so we're going to upgrade with someone else. So there's different ways I think there's through, but I think there's also a what is core and what is non-core that you want to outsource. The example of the distribution trucks and having someone else schedule them. I'm not sure I would say that's not something that utility really needs to do well. Now certainly we might want to partner with someone, but a black box that says, hey, we're just going to tell you how to schedule your distribution trucks and you're going to pay us based upon the value. You have to think, is that something that we should be doing ourselves? Now,
I agree.
Yeah, so there's, all that, your question just kind of goes down this waterfall of other questions around what's core, what's non-core. How do you partner with a vendor? Is the vendor someone strategic? Is the vendor someone, this one niche that could go away and not too long ago? It's not an easy answer, but I think that's also why this conversation is so generates other questions, because we're all still, we're in the middle of it trying to figure it out. So I'm not sure if anyone.
And I can just add, Sasha's not the only one who's in the middle of having this kind of conversation. We're having this exact same conversation with several of our clients right now. What does providing service really mean in the future?
And, interestingly, in this space, I think there's granularity as well too. It's not black or white. It isn't that you just have to acquire a service and now a third party is directing your crews. It could be that the service they provide is to your controllers or your dispatchers to give them recommendations on next assignments, and then they make the ultimate decision on where to dispatch your crew. So I see a middle ground in there, and if somebody did offer that as a service, that might be something worth subscribing to rather than building, because I would agree that that's probably a non-core activity, but you would still want to run that, at least my opinion is, we'd still want to run that through the people that actually control our crews and not have it automatically dispatch somebody. Much like we're doing grid control. I mean, right now, when we have automatic switching orders created, they don't execute on the grid automatically, because for safety reasons and for communications purposes, we want to make sure that everything is ticked and tied and effectively communicated with the people that are working on the grid. That is done through a controller who then has the ultimate responsibility for executing that order.
But I'll come back, and for those of you who, I like to use wisdom from my wife often, and I know we were driving, and when we're driving, and Waze tells us there's an accident ahead and go on this detour, she often reminds me that computer, which is using the power of so many different things, probably knows better than you sitting behind the car staring 100 feet ahead of you. So why don't you listen to where the map is telling you to go? And so sometimes there's a little bit around how do you change. The dispatcher might not know what they might not know with all these different things coming in. So when is that to the point where it does break tradition of someone saying, I'm going to use my 100 years, but my years of knowledge to make this call, where it's getting too complicated for you to make that call, and it really doesn't have that's also some of the challenges going how this is changing and how to do it. So I usually listen to my wife, listen to the Waze, and we usually get there faster and avoid the accident. So
from a genetic coding, so we've got a nice diversity here. From a genetically coding view of life, that is, as a utility, we have, as utility people, sort of genetic code. Does paying a service provider on a shared savings basis or that kind of basis, does that float, or does that just immediately cause recoil? No, there's just no way. We don't know what that value proposition is going to look like. They're probably going to take us to the cleaners, because you can have different kind of compensation mechanisms for these sorts of outcome-based services as well. And in fact, the example of the distribution of the fuel crew dispatch company that wanted to do that was going to be their model, shared savings basis, because their commitment is to save a lot of money. They're going to invest in all of the CIT infrastructure, so they want a piece of the action, so to speak. I mean, how does that float with it? I see smiles across the whole panel here, like, no way, this is not happening.
I'll jump in. I'll say generally that would make us really nervous. I can't see us adopting that kind of a pricing model, primarily because we really don't know we don't have the finite data it would take to make that kind of a commitment as far as the savings and the measurement of the sales. There's just so many variables involved in our business, and maybe we don't really know from a measurability standpoint with a lot of precision what those costs are for those finite units of work.
Okay.
That's what we see as well. I mean, the unknown is what drives the conversation there. It's funny, the ones that we've done due diligence on, essentially around field services, we all go out and improve the data to each other, and then at the end of the day, the CEO says, you're going to make too much money, because once you prove that it's viable, the dollars and cents start making sense, and you can see where that partner, you're saving money, but you're also taking risk, and you're kind of wanting that return. The return of build it my own and just have it my own, it's less, and you get to kind of keep some of that. So there's some maturity that we, I think, as an industry have to get around that it's the data point to get in, but once you prove the data, it's like, wow, do we really want to do this? And I love the point Sasha made of partnering. And this is not an art. This is beyond an RFP type of relationship. Right. This is something bigger.
How would the water utility feel about that?
Well, I think in the water utility industry, you're going to deal with the very large privates who will probably be looking and saying, well, we can do that just as well. But I think there's going to be a very big driver in the small utility market in the water industry to want to provide those level of services to their customer base, but not having the core competency to do it. And I think it will pencil in. I think that we need utilities who are, who look at AMI and what it can deliver, and then they look to, well, how can I sustain that? How can I sustain the return on that investment? How am I going to, and not my core competency to fully understand the analytics that come out of that. And maybe it's just nothing more than a service that's just monitoring analytics and sending me a work order. Or maybe it's even further and saying, well, we'll take care of that work order. And every utility, depending on in the water industry, if it's big privates and it's shareholders, or if it's on the smaller maybe municipal side, you could see the council members and elected officials and city managers who are saying, look, we have to deliver this. So I think the water is going to be very interested in making that happen in some areas.
Delivering isn't really the pointy end of the stick that I'm thinking about. That is, I know from, Matthew will have the same information, I want to ask him the question. We've got benchmark benefits, so I know that the business case doesn't have to be a 20-year case or a 15-year case. A whole lot of things go into those things. They can be well under 10 years, which means if somebody comes and offers you an outcome-based service model, there's going to be money to be made. There's a pie. And that pie is on the table. And there are two people who want a slice of that pie. Savings are traditionally viewed as benefits that flow back to the utility. But if somebody else is going to invest in the CapEx to create that benefit, then they might want some amount of that pie as well. And I think when you pencil out the numbers, as Matthew was saying, CEO looks at those numbers and goes, wait a minute, that's pretty gosh darn attractive. Thank you for showing me that solution. Now get out of here and don't let the door hit you on the way out.
We sell a lot of consulting gigs by this conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we don't want it as a service, but
we want to do it. Right.
Let's go do the project.
Exactly. Right. Once you decide you want to make that CapEx investment and you see what the benefit is, that's exactly what our recovery model is. And it is not to go share those benefits with a third party.
I think it becomes a financial capacity issue because we've had one project where the CEO, large investor-owned electric gas utility, said, hey guys, it's very simple. Big biz case, go find me a service provider. I'm not, great ROI, great rate of return, great everything, but I don't want to invest the capital into that system. I want that capability, blah, 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 but I'm going to do something else with my capital. So I think it's a dynamic driver. Now, that wasn't a shared service sale by the supplier in that particular case, but the models are there. Sasha, I think I stepped on you when I asked Darron a question, so I apologize for that.
No, please. I'm good.
Great discussion. My question really is, what do you think we can learn of lessons from market structure? So we've seen competitive markets in different parts of the world. We see New York REV discussions in North America. We've got experience of Texas, the UK, obviously I'm familiar with. So in the outcome-based services and the way the nature of customer relationships and customer service is changing, what lessons are you looking at from other market structures that you think will apply more generally to North America?
Well, I'd like to jump in and talk about Texas because we lived it. And I'll tell you, when our market deregulated 12 years ago, we really thought we were going to move from having 2.3 million or 2.2 million customers at that time to about 100 retail customers, because that's how many retail providers there are that we support. And while they are new customers and there are clearly market expectations around those, we did not lose and we have not lost that relationship with those 2.2 or 2.4 million customers. We view them as our customers. They view us as their service provider. We're responsible for the delivery, safe, reliable delivery of the electricity to their meter, and they pay somebody else for that, and we get paid from that third party. So I'd say my first observation is that we thought the market was going to look different from our perspective than it does, and we didn't judge that correctly. And so we've built that relationship, built on that relationship with those customers. They have expectations. They want to be able to communicate with us. They want us to communicate with them. And so we've kind of morphed into that. So that was the big change. The other thing is the market's expectations are evolving really rapidly and have evolved a lot in the 12 years. So what used to be the expectations of the market, on speed of service delivery, of response time and things like that, has shortened dramatically because of the investment that we've made in our smart meters, the investment that we've made in our distribution management systems and things like that. So what we used to get 24 hours to respond to now, we get 1 hour. What we used to be able to do 5 days a week, we now have to do 7 by 24, things like that. And so that puts a lot of pressure on our technology systems, because we used to have weekends that we didn't have to do reconnects. Well, now we've got to do reconnects 7 by 24. And so our systems can't be down because we have 30 minutes an hour to reconnect a customer. Well, that's not enough time to realize your IT system is down and go roll a truck because you can't get there. So there become a whole different set of opportunities in the deregulated market.
So interesting with service, Sasha, honestly, I don't know if it applies to Duke or not. If it does, please comment. But the question to Jeff is going to be, all right, we just had a long set of discussions around the customer and customer expectations, and if you don't meet their expectations, they're out the door. Well, Texas gave everybody the opportunity to walk out the door and go to an REP, a retail energy provider, for the competitive energy suppliers in Texas. Historically, all the prognostications were 20 to 25% of our customers dislike us to an extent where if they are given the opportunity to walk out the door, they're gone. What percentage of the retail customers left the utility and went to REPs?
Well, the way Texas deregulated, we actually sold our retail business.
Right.
So that became Reliant Energy,
Right.
and they were in the Houston market as the legacy company. They were not allowed to make the rate reductions until their market share dropped below, I believe it was 60%.
Okay.
And so once it dropped below 60%, then they could become a competitor in the market, like the other retail providers. And so it did drop to that point. But there are still customers out there who have stayed with Reliant and enjoy that relationship, and that's all great. There are some, unfortunately, out there that still believe that we, CenterPoint Energy, are their electricity provider. Partially confused by the fact that they buy their gas from us. So they do get a gas bill from us, but they don't get an electric bill from us, but they get confused by that. And we're 12 years into the market. So, the market is working. I mean, I don't think there's anything that can be more commoditized than electron. I mean, there's quality and the delivery of it is exactly the same no matter who you buy it from, because one company delivers all of it.
I would have believed you until I read the story about the commodification of water in England. They're now forcing the independent water utilities to interconnect and become like a distribution service organization and creating a retail reselling market for water. I never would have expected to see that. I'm sorry, Sasha.
No, all I was going to say to finish up the question is there are satisfied customers and there are loyal customers. This is a big difference. JD Power, which a lot of us use that, but they just started the Net Promoter Score. So this is the first wave of data where they're now doing NPS scores. And when you look at it, we have a tremendous amount of detractors in that vocabulary, people who are not promoters of utilities. And when you talk with Apple and you talk with other companies, their purpose in life, other than making a profit, is to make sure, and they do that by making sure detractors are minimized in their system, and they go after the detractors. And so that's the next evolution, I think, of where we're all going, is to have satisfied customers and to have loyal customers. And that's a totally, I won't say different, but it's a focus that is different than making someone satisfied. How do you have, and I asked that question, how do you ask of loyalty of an industry that has regulated monopoly status, and you don't have a choice, and that's a little different in Texas than it's going to be in other places. So,
well, that's a perfect observation, because part of me always kind of smiles a little bit when we as utilities talk about having customers. My comment, just to drive the point home to many of my clients, has been, no, we have hostages. They can't really go anywhere. They can complain, they can do all kinds of things, they can go to the regulators, but they can't really do anything different. That's changing now. They can buy less, or they can,
Well, I guess what I would say is, as a regulated utility, we implement public policy.
Right.
We implement society's public policy as a regulated utility. You want to promote solar, we'll put in an RPS. You want to promote solar, we'll keep net energy metering. We have low income policies. I mean, you can have certain segments subsidize other segments. Economic development, we'll put in an economic development rider, make it all work. So, I mean, I wouldn't say hostages. What I would say is that we're a system of really implement public policy because there's societal benefit. We have to serve all customers. We don't have a choice. And otherwise, if it's in private market, we have, we learned this in the hurricanes that occurred. We have customers 5-10 miles end of a line that make really little economic sense for anyone to serve them, but someone who has to, which is what we do. Proudly, too. We do it proudly.
And it's a proud tradition of whether it's water, whether it's electric, it's a proud tradition. The challenge is changing the genetic code to really think in terms of customers rather than just using the word. Because we've heard all of you talk about customer expectations are changing because they're now thinking of themselves as customers rather than somebody who just gets a bill and pays the bill. We are officially at the end. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? I'm happy to entertain those. Otherwise, I think we're going to close out. Great. Please, a round of applause for the panelists.